All right, people, Mr. Street here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about some small engine mechanics, some basics of how these things function. The first thing I'm going to show you is this two different small engines here. They have some differences as far as how they would be used and how they would sit being used, how they would position, but the inside function is basically the same. And the main reason I'm showing you this one is because it's a complete engine, right? I could put gas in the tank, I could pull the rope. This one should start up and be able to run, okay? This engine, on the other hand, has finished its useful life as an engine and is now functioning as a teaching aid, right? And you can see here where I have, cut holes in it, here and here, cut this head all apart and stuff, and cut a hole in the side of the cylinder right there. And that means this engine will never run again, right? You can see there's no way that you can close up that big hole and have this thing actually function. So this is now a teaching tool, right? Well, a couple things you can see here. This is from a lawnmower engine, so I'm saying from a lawnmower. And normally in real life it would sit like this. And there's a bunch of stuff on here that's missing, like the pull rope, the flywheel, all this different stuff that actually work, particularly like the blade and everything that would be down here on the bottom, right? So this would normally, it would sit like this, and the blade would attach down here at the bottom of the crankshaft, and that would spin around really fast and cut the grass. So for this thing to function, this piston moves up and down inside the cylinder, right? And the whole idea is for the engine to pull in gasoline, ignite that gasoline, have the explosive force of the gasoline burning, push this piston downwards, and that's what creates the power, right? Now to have all that happen, we'll see in a minute on the board, but also you have to be able to move gas in and out of it, right? Move fresh air and fuel into it and burnt air and fuel out, right? And so you can see when I turn the shaft, this little valve right here opens and closes, right? So that's open right now, and as I turn this a little more, it's going to close up, right? And then as I do it some more, the other valve will open up at some point in the function. There it goes. That's the intake valve right there that allows the air and fuel to come in. Hopefully you can see that is open right there, and it would connect up to a carburetor right here, would allow fresh air and fuel to be drawn into the cylinder, right? And normally, this thing here is the head. It would be solid, and it would sit on top here and totally seal up this combustion chamber like it is on this one, right? Okay, so the next thing for us to do is to take a look at our screen here. We're going to look at the computer screen and talk about the basics. Now we're going to talk about just the basics of a 4-stroke internal combustion gasoline engine, right? And so when it says 4-stroke, it means there's 4 basic movements of the piston inside the cylinder, and that is what makes the whole thing work, right? The basic jobs that an engine has to do: it's got to bring in air and fuel, it's got to compress that air and fuel to intensify the reaction, ignite it, have it burn, and when it burns you get this quick, essentially explosive expansion of air and gas, heat, and all that pushes this piston downward inside the engine, right? And then that gives you the power. Once the power is expended, that piston comes up, pushes out the burnt air and fuel, and pulls in some fresh air and fuel to do it again, right? So now we'll break it down into 4 strokes. 4 strokes: intake, compression, power, and exhaust. Intake. If we look here at this example here, this part seen on the screen right now, and this is, give credit to the internet here, this is a website called animatedengines.com. Okay, so we can actually go to a part on the page here where it shows all these pieces moving as they would be inside the engine. But for now, we'll just think about just the explanation of what's happening at the different times. So right now, as you can see this big arrow here, this is the piston inside the cylinder. You know, the cylinder is a round tube, basically, and the piston is a round thing that fits inside there, right? And this piston, as it moves down, okay, this crank right here is turning this direction, right? And this piston is moving downwards. That creates low pressure inside the cylinder. At the same time that this is moving downwards, this intake valve has opened up. And low pressure inside here draws in new air and fuel through the carburetor and into the cylinder, so that you get a charge of fresh air and fuel mixed together. It needs to be mixed together. It needs for the fuel to be vaporized inside here for it to work properly. Okay, so the intake stroke, piston moves from top dead center to bottom dead center. And dead center meaning when this connecting rod is right in the middle. Now for fun, we'll go back up. I think it would be valuable to see the whole thing functioning for a second. You can see the animation here of how the this crank moves up and around like this, and that moves the piston up and down, right? And so this lateral motion, this reciprocating back and forth motion of the piston is converted into rotational motion right here at the crankshaft. Okay? Okay, now we'll go down here then and finish going through. So intake, piston moves down, draws in air and fuel, intake valve is open, right? The second part of it is a compression stroke. Okay, so it's called a stroke. When the piston moves down, that's a stroke. When the piston comes back, that's a second stroke, right, of the piston. When the piston comes upwards, both of these valves, intake valve, exhaust valve, are closed. The air and fuel mixture gets compressed inside here, right? And that gets it ready to be ignited. Okay, next, right here, the spark plug is going to fire. When this is up near the top, the spark plug is going to fire, ignite the air and fuel, which drives the piston downwards. So here's finally the power stroke. First was an intake stroke, second is compression stroke, third, power stroke. You're exploding the air and fuel in here, it's pushing the piston downward, and that's what gives you the power. That's what the whole purpose for this operation is. To get that power, to get that twisting force, to use it to do some kind of work, right? And of course, gasoline engines are used for tons of different things, whether it's boats, cars, trucks, you name it. Of course, lawnmowers and small power equipment, stuff like that. There's tons of things. Finally, when this gets down to the bottom, you've gotten all the power you can out of it. The piston's going to continue and come back up. The exhaust valve is going to open up, and the piston's going to push this used, spent, burnt air and fuel out through the exhaust port, through the muffler, and out into the air, right? And so that's the fourth stroke. So if we look here, we'll go back through those really quickly. Starts with intake. You can see it written over here, intake stroke. Second is compression stroke. Third is a power stroke. And finally, the exhaust stroke, right? And if you look at this website, it'll also do some explanation of how all these different things work, right? You know, for this thing to work properly, you need to have an ignition system that creates a spark. You need a fuel system that gets that air and fuel ready to come in. The exhaust system basically is a muffler, and so on. And then, of course, the engine has to connect to a machine, some kind of thing, to do some work with that twisting force, that torque that it's creating. You're going to possibly you're going to run a generator, an air compressor. You're going to power a lawnmower, maybe just a utility vehicle. You know, a little Kawasaki Mule or something that drives around and hauls stuff. You know, drive a car, whatever. And of course, now if you have a car, they typically, like, this is a single cylinder, right? And that's a single cylinder engine right there, like for a lawnmower. And then when you hear about cars, it means they say 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder, meaning that it's all connected. Now you need to look at some illustrations as to understand, but it's possible to have 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 cylinders, even more, to do, you know, to have more and more power. Of course, burn more and more fuel too, right? But yeah, that's the way that works. So that's really the basics of the four-stroke cycle and is illustrated using a small gas engine.